This is the morning brief from the Economic Times.
Last Sunday, Japan's Suzuki Motor, the parent of Maruti Suzuki, said that it will invest over 10,000 crore rupees in India for electric vehicles. This announcement got everyone interested. After all, the largest car maker in India had been dilly-dallying when it came to electric vehicles for years now. In fact, less than a week before this announcement, R.C. Bhargava, the chairman of Maruti Suzuki, said that electric cars may not be the best solution for India. He suggested that we rather focus on CNG-powered cars and hybrid cars. And then, Suzuki suddenly came with this announcement of investing big money into making electric cars in India. What are we missing here? Did Maruti Suzuki suddenly have a change of heart? Was it a feeling of FOMO, the fear of missing out, as rivals like Tata Motors are running away with the EV game? Or was it the government pressure that forced it to finally bite the bullet and commit to EVs? After all, India relies heavily on imported crude to run its vehicles, and the government wants to cut its import bill. So, how has Suzuki Motor and Maruti Suzuki suddenly changed their stance on electric vehicles? We are here to find out that and more. It's Friday, 25th of March. I am Nehal Chaliawala, and you are listening to Maruti Suzuki's Electric Gambit on the Morning Brief. To understand why everyone is taking note of what Maruti Suzuki does, we need to take a step back and understand the company. The story of Maruti Suzuki is closely tied to the Indian economy. It started life as a government venture called Maruti Udyog Limited in 1981. This was the India before economic liberalization. The government owned most businesses in a socialistic setup. The goal was to make affordable cars for the Aam Aadmi, the average Indian. But the government obviously didn't know how to make cars. Enter Japan's Suzuki. It was a perfect marriage. After all, who could be a better partner to make affordable cars than the company that pioneered the concept of small and cheap K cars in Japan? Maruti soon had a near monopolistic grip on the market. As the years went by and the Indian economy opened to the outside world, more companies started entering the Indian market. Maruti's ownership also changed. The government exited the company, Suzuki increased its stake over 50%, and the company listed on the stock exchanges. But even today, Maruti Suzuki has an iron grip on India's car market. They say when Maruti Suzuki sneezes, the Indian auto industry catches a cold. Every second car sold in India is a Maruti Suzuki. The closest rival Hyundai sells less than half of what Maruti does.
The easiest way to introduce Maruti Suzuki to somebody who doesn't understand Indian car market is to just take him across on the road, and the car that he will see the most is a Maruti. The largest car maker for the longest time, they have really revolutionized the Indian automotive markets landscape.
That's my colleague Sumant Banerji, consulting editor at ET Auto. Sumant closely follows the electric vehicles industry.
They have always been, in a way, at the front of any technological developments that have taken place in the market, except for maybe in the last decade or so when competition has become tough. But they remain very, very strong. They have the best idea of the pulse of the market. They understand consumers like no other company. I would even dare say that they understand consumers in India like no other company anywhere across sectors, including even some of the FMCG firms.
But for a company with this sort of market clout, Maruti Suzuki's focus on electric vehicles has been lukewarm to say the least. Until Sunday's announcement, the company had not clearly stated its EV plans for India at all. This is in sharp contrast to automakers around the world. Market leaders in other parts of the world, think Volkswagen, General Motors, Hyundai, already have electric cars running on roads and have committed billions of dollars to future EV projects.
In the last decade, they have been lagging behind on technology. This is most pronounced in the electric vehicle space. We all know that EVs are the future, and the government has been talking about propagating and encouraging EVs for the longest time. There are some manufacturers who have been a little more proactive. Tata Motors is one example. We would have expected Maruti to be equally proactive as the market leader, but they seem to be dragging their feet for the longest time. And so the announcement which happened on Sunday, it was in a way surprising, but not entirely unexpected. Surprising because given their track record over the last 4 years, where they have been talking about how EVs might not work in India, and there are lots of challenges very specific to the Indian market which need to be overcome. But given the fact that EVs are the future, it is very, very obvious now. So it wasn't unexpected really that Maruti will bite the bullet, knowing now that they also are in a tie-up with Toyota globally, which is Suzuki and Toyota. We know that they would have gotten into it. So yes, surprising, but not entirely unexpected.
To be fair, Maruti Suzuki's absence from the EV segment is not from a lack of trying. The company did work on an electric variant of its popular model Wagon R, but that didn't exactly work out.
They had worked on a Wagoner EV for the Japanese market, and that was seen as one of the alternatives for the Indian market.
That's my Economic Times colleague Ketan Thakkar. Ketan has tracked the auto industry for Economic Times for over a decade now.
But it realized that with significant imports, the costs were moving up, and prospective Indian buyer was not willing to pay 10 to 12 lakh for a small electric car. And they realized that it is little too early.
Remember when I said that Maruti Suzuki has long maintained that the right solution for India are hybrid and CNG cars and not EVs? Here's what RC Bhargava, the chairman of Maruti Suzuki, said at an ET Auto event last week.
The penetration of electric vehicles so far, despite all the programs that we have had and the incentives which are being given, is about 0.5%. And therefore, we have to consider whether the EV strategy is really serving its purpose in present times in India. The electrification of vehicles in India is going to move slowly, and its impact on the reduction of greenhouse gases is going to be small because of the composition of the energy use in this country. And this is going to be the situation at least for the next 20 years, perhaps. In this period, we need to use other means of reducing greenhouse gases. And this includes the use of CNG, bio-CNG, ethanol, and hybrid technology. Government needs to look at all these alternative forms of energy which are especially applicable to in India. I don't think bio-CNG or CNG are applicable to the big cars which are used in America and perhaps in Europe also. But in India, this is a very adaptable and a very applicable technology.
And Maruti Suzuki has enough motivation to bet on CNG and hybrid among other technologies. All Japanese car makers have invested heavily in hybrid, and they do want to see a return on their investment. And CNG being most suitable as a fuel for small cars, it again plays into the hands of Maruti Suzuki. But the company says that electric cars may not reduce India's crude import bill to the extent that everyone expects. Ketan, is there any merit to that argument?
If one were to really look at various agencies and their forecast, in the best case scenario, the electric vehicle penetration could be as high as 30% by the end of the decade. And if one were to really dig those numbers deeply, you'll realize that of the fuel imports that India has, 72% is diesel and 28% is petrol. So Maruti has already exited diesel. And within that petrol bucket, 65% is used by millions of two-wheelers that are sold today. And passenger vehicle merely consumes about 30 to 35%. So even in a best case scenario, 30%, the reduction of fuel imports may be a very low single digit. So that's exactly what RC Bhargav was trying to make a point, that the EVs alone can't solve the ballooning import bill challenge, especially in the car front. Yes, they are a much stronger alternative for millions of two-wheelers and lakhs of three-wheelers that we have on the road.
Then what do we make of the company's announcement on Sunday?
There's a lot of mind share over market share when it comes to electric vehicles. And a lot of companies also use that as a tool to market themselves, saying that how they are preparing themselves for the future. So as a market leader, Maruti Suzuki, I feel, did not want to be left behind. And I think this is also kind of a signal to the establishment stakeholders that they are also aligning to the way the center is viewing when it comes to the future of mobility in India.
Wait, let me get this straight. So Suzuki's announcement now is in part due to FOMO, right? But even now, the company isn't running towards EVs at full speed like most global automakers are. It is keeping all options open.
So, Maruti Suzuki has always believed in working on multiple technologies. It is currently working on half a dozen different powertrain options, right from CNG, bio CNG, hydrogen CNG, flex fuel, hybrid, as well as electric. So, this investment announcement is purely for the optics, for the establishment that they too are committed to an electric future. However, since the penetration of EVs in India is still less than 1%, and it'll take a while before we reach 5%, 10%, or 15%. So their view has been quite consistent that time for EVs will come, but it's not now.
And if one looks at the timeline, the company seems in no hurry to launch EVs. While the announcement came last week, the first Maruti Suzuki electric car may not come to the market anytime sooner than 2025.
When I saw the timeline of 2025, that did not come as a surprise, given the fact that they had made it clear that they would want to first focus on building the local supply chain before they really commit huge money. One may ask the question, why not now? Why in 2025? And they've been quite vehement in stating that there's not enough volume for electric vehicles in India at present. The current cost structures are way too high, which will not be acceptable to larger masses, which is Maruti Suzuki's prospective customer base. So clearly, it wants to use the next 4 years in preparing the groundwork in terms of localization, local value addition, as against imports, which makes the car out of reach for a majority of its customer base.
So Maruti Suzuki wants to ensure that most parts for its EVs are procured from the domestic market. This would help them keep the prices low. There is merit to that argument. Local parts also help keep the maintenance low. This has been Maruti Suzuki's strength traditionally. A lot of car makers that came to India struggled because they didn't have a local supply base like Maruti did. The Volkswagen Group, in fact, has invested €1 billion in India since 2018 to make cars that have more local parts. That would help them keep prices low for the consumers. So yeah, Maruti Suzuki is waiting to localize EVs in India. But a commitment of 10,000 crore rupees, is that enough? By no stretch is that a small number. But if we look at what other companies are investing, say Tata Motors, they have given an investment target of 15,000 crore rupees for the next 5 years. And let's not forget they already have EVs on roads. Globally also, commitment to EV projects runs into tens of billions of dollars. So Sumant, isn't Suzuki's investment too little in comparison?
This is somewhere in the middle as far as the corpus of announcement is concerned. Tata Motors has already talked about 15,000 crore or somewhat over 5 years that they are investing in electric vehicles. That in some way also includes some of their commercial vehicles plans, so they have a much wider portfolio. Maruti is only into passenger vehicles. So to that extent, 10,000 crore is a decent sum. If you compare what Hyundai announced, which was also only last December, so Hyundai said something about 4,000 crore. What is interesting here is that Maruti has spelled out where this investment is going. It's not only in products. They will be making the vehicles in Gujarat, and they are also talking about making batteries. So that is interesting. So they are purely looking at some substantial manufacturing footprint. So the sum is decent. It also comes on the backdrop of the PLI scheme announcements that have been made, where Maruti also has one. So a lot of investment announcements are happening. I expect this number to go up as and when more details and clarity emerges. So this is, I don't think, the final figure. I would imagine that at least by 40 or 50%, this will go up in the next 2 to 3 years.
So, what's the roadmap like for Maruti Suzuki here onwards? Ketan?
So one can definitely see India becoming a big exports hub for both Suzuki and Toyota in the future. And the initial understanding that we have of the project that is likely to come from Suzuki Toyota in 2025, it has a significant amount of exports. Almost 70 to 80% of production plan that they have will be exported to the overseas market. So clearly, it's a first step. Since volumes are low, they want to first be ready with the first set of models. And given the fact that there's a huge lineup likely from Toyota BYD in China and in Japan and world over, you do expect Toyota Suzuki to kind of adapt and adopt some of those platforms and products in the Indian market in the future.
BYD is the largest electric vehicle maker in China. Toyota, which has an alliance with Suzuki, also has a joint venture with BYD. The companies are expected to share technology and expertise in different markets.
So it's just a matter of time for them to implement those technologies in India. And Mr. Bhargav has said in the past that it's not that we don't know how to make electric vehicles. It is just that it is way too expensive and out of reach of majority of their prospective buyers. So they can still bring in the EVs, but it'll be expensive. And they don't want to bring in imported EVs into India.
That sounds promising. In fact, experts say that the reason why Tata Motors and Mahindra are so proactively investing in EVs is because they may not get technology from a global partner like Maruti Suzuki can. In fact, all multinational automakers in India can get technology from their global parent, but Tata Motors and Mahindra can turn to no one. But Tata Motors has become the de facto leader in the electric car market. Isn't Maruti Suzuki worried, Sumant?
Tata Motors has clearly taken the lead here, launching multiple products. And by the time Maruti's first product comes in, Tata Motors will probably have 5 or 6 products in the market. Hyundai would probably have 2 or 3. Kia will have a few. What they are thinking about is that they believe, let the others set the stage and the foundation, let others work and create a good network of charging stations all across the country. And then they will come in with an offering which is very, very impeccably priced and with the right kind of battery management system. And they will take over the market just like they have done in so many years over so many technologies. That is what they think. It is, you can say it is partly based on some hubris, which any market leader has. You can also say that probably it is a smart thing to do because this is still an evolving story.
Snatching market dominance from rivals like Tata Motors may not be the only challenge for Maruti Suzuki when it starts selling electric cars. Building one's reputation as an affordable brand has some trade-off. The company is now known as the affordable car maker in India. And as the Indian consumer evolves, Maruti will have to convince them that it can do much more than making affordable cars. After all, a competitive market is not all sunshine and rainbows, even if you're Maruti Suzuki.
It's not that Maruti has got everything right all along. It's still not able to break into the upgrader space where the Indian consumer is graduating to. The 10 to 20 lakh bracket. The Indian market is moving there. EVs are going to be in that space, and that's a space where Maruti Suzuki is weak. So I think that is going to be the biggest moment of reckoning, if you ask me, whether Indian buyer is willing to pay premium for Maruti cars, which was always seen as Aam Aadmi or an affordable car maker in India.
India's largest car maker has finally given some clarity on its electrification plans. Call it FOMO or pressure from the government, the company has given in to the EV hype. But the company has not given up on CNG and hybrid cars yet. It is betting on all options. And while the announcement has come now, there is some time before you can buy a Maruti Suzuki electric car. Till that happens, there are some challenges that the brand needs to work on. It has to shed the affordable car tag and position itself as a premium option. I mean, would you buy a 15 lakh rupees Maruti EV? Maruti Suzuki is working hard to make sure you do. That's all from us today. I'm Nehal Chaliawala from the Economic Times, and you have been listening to Maruti Suzuki's Electric Gambit on the Morning Brief. This episode was produced by Bhavya Dilip Kumar from Economic Times and Swati Joshi from Awaaz. Sound editor Soundarya Jayachandran from Awaaz. Executive producer Arijit Barman. If you like listening to this episode, do share it on your social media. The Morning Brief airs every Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. Thank you for listening. All external clips used in this episode belong to their respective owners. Credits for all external clips are mentioned in the description.